All right. Good morning or good afternoon. Today we're going to work on the Chicago Bulls worksheet. You should have in front of you, or you can find it on our assignment sheet. Um, there's a link to it. And so in this video, I'm going to go through the first couple pages with you to give you an idea of how and a reminder of how to go through and work through all this stuff. Okay. So there's a lot of information on here. There's the Bulls players. This is the current Bulls roster. I just pulled this off the internet. There's their ages, their heights in feet and inches. Now I've converted and made a column for inches for you to make it easier to compare. It's easier to compare. They're in quantitative values, not like 6'8". Rather than 6'8", we'll call that 80 inches, and so on. And then the weights we're going to analyze here, and probably most interesting is their salaries. So we're going to look at the salaries. There's a lot of variation in the salaries. Okay. So down here at the bottom, perform the following steps to find the 5-number summary and create a box plot for the weights. Now notice here we're talking about the weights. So we're going to look at the weights column. Okay. Now it looks like doesn't seem to be huge variation in the weights, but we're going to actually do the statistics to figure that out. So we're going to enter the data, the player's weights in the calculator. So just a reminder how to do this. You go to your calculator. Okay, we're going to go to a new document, number 1. We're going to add lists and spreadsheets. Okay, first thing we have to do, later on we're going to do data and statistics. But first thing we have to do is we had to enter the data into the list. So in column A, you're going to go up where the A is. That's where you're going to type in what you want to call this column. I'm going to call it WTS. And then arrow down, leave that blank next to the equals. And in number 1, you're going to start entering the weights. Okay, so I'm going to look at the weights column. 220. Oops. 220, enter. And I'm going to switch over to this calculator where I already have it entered. If you want, you can pause it, enter this into your calculator yourself. Down to the final weight, which is 235. One thing you want to be careful when you enter that last one, make sure you hit enter. It's not actually acknowledging that you've entered that last data point. That down here at the bottom, that's the 235. Until you hit enter. Now I usually go back and I just verify that I've got everything in here correct. Okay, I've already done that. I've got 17 different pieces of data. So I counted there's 17 players. That's all set. Okay, so you're going to enter that in the calculator. Then you're going to find the median of the weights. Okay, so this is where we entered this data in the calculator. And in order to find the median, there's 2 ways to do this. We're going to do it by hand first. And in order to do that, we have to sort the column. You could do this manually, or I'm just going to remind you how to do this in the calculator. Arrow all the way up in this column until it highlights the whole column. Hit the menu button. And then just number 1 under actions, down at the bottom is sort, 6. And we're just going to sort in ascending order, lowest to highest. Okay, now I'm going to list these out. Now let's put them in order. 185 is the lightest player. So I'm going to list these out. Okay, we've got 185, 190, 195, 195, 195. Arrow down. 200, 205, 210, 215, 215, 220, 220, 235, 240, 245, 260, and 270. Okay, so I've listed all the weights. Let me see if I can move me out of the way a little bit. I'm going to count, make sure I have all 17. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There are 17 weights. That's an odd number. So if I split it in the middle, 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I circle this one, there's going to be 8 over here, and there's 8 over here. That makes 16, and here's 17. This is the median right here. So find the median of the weights. The median is equal to 215. Okay, and remember what that means. 50% of our players weigh more than that. 50% of our players weigh less than that. Okay, find the median of the first half. So here's my first half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If there's only one in the middle, you don't count that in the top half or the bottom half. If there were two, we'd split them up. One of them would go in the bottom half, one would go in the top half. So we're only looking at these 8 values to find the median of the first half of the weights. Okay, the first half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1, 2, 3, there's 2 in the middle. And then 1, 2, 3. We have to average these two. 195 and 195 average out to 195. So the Q1 is equal to 195. Okay, pounds. All right, let's go to the next page. Now we're finding the median of the second half of the weights. This is called the upper quartile or the third quartile. So we're finding the middle of the top half. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to look at 1, 2, 3, the two middle ones, and we have to average those. Halfway between 235 and 240 is 237.5. I did that kind of quickly. If you're not sure how to do that, you average these two. 235 plus 240 and divide by 2. You're going to get 237.5. Okay, so that's Q3. So Q3, or your upper quartile, is 237.5 pounds. LBS. Okay. Find the inner quartile range. Okay, so the inner quartile range is that range. First of all, the overall range goes max to min. Okay, so why don't we just do that off to the side? The range, which we saw before, is the max minus the min. Okay, the max was, let's look at our calculator. What was the max again? 270. That was the heaviest player. And then the minimum was 185. So minus 185. That's going to be 270 to 185. I think that's 85 pounds, right? That's your range. Okay, but this didn't ask for your range. This asked for the inner quartile range. So this is kind of the middle range. This is the distance from the first quartile to the third quartile. So the third quartile minus the first quartile is going to give us that inside range. Okay, I'll talk more about that when we draw the box plot. So our Q3 was 237.5 minus the Q1. The Q1 we got, what did we get? 195. Okay, and you can use your calculator if you want for that. 237.5 minus 195, 42.5. So 42.5 is your IQR. Okay. Now, take 1.5 times the IQR. What we're doing here is we're looking for outliers. So if we take 1.5 times the IQR, so 1.5 times your IQR, well, that's 1.5 times 42.5, and that's equal to 1.5 times 42.5. That gives us 63.75. Okay, and remember the rule for finding outliers. You're going to look at anything where you have where your Q1 is, and from the Q1, because that's the smaller value, you're going to subtract 1.5 times the IQR. And you're also going to take the Q3 and you're going to add. Remember, Q1 is smaller than Q3. So you're going to the left for the Q1 and to the right for the Q3, 1.5 times the IQR. Remember, we already calculated 1.5 times the IQR came out to be 63.75. So that thing is 63.75. So we want the Q1, which was 195. The Q1 was 195 minus 63.75. Then we want our Q3, which was 237.5 plus 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, and this comes out to be 131.25, and this comes out to be 301.25. This is in pounds. Okay, now these are our boundaries. These are our outer limits of what would be considered an outlier. So any player, and if you think about Bulls players, they're all really tall and all fairly fit. Their weights don't have huge variation. There's some that are heavier, some that are thinner, but really they're all big guys and they're all fit. So in order to be an outlier, and you saw the weights. The weights were all kind of bunched together. A lot of people weighed, let's look here, 195, 195, 195, 200, 205, 210, 215, 215, 220. A lot of them bunched together, not very far apart in weights, okay? Not a ton of variation. In order to be considered an outlier, somebody would have to weigh less than 131.25 pounds or more than 301.25 pounds, okay? There's nobody outside that range. Our max, what is our max? I think our max was 270. Okay, so even that 270-pound player, 70-pound player is not an outlier. The min was 185, so nowhere near 130, 31.25. So if you have any outliers, numbers that are really extreme, they will be outside these fences. We consider these the fences. Okay, and outside the two numbers you found in step 6. So when we say we've got no outliers, so we could write something like this: there are no outliers in the set of weights, W-E-I-G-H-T. I'll just say the weight data. Data is just information. Because no players weigh less than 121.5 or 131.5. Okay, that 131.5 comes from here. Okay, and no players weigh more than 301.25 pounds. Okay, and this comes from this calculation right here. Remember, that was the Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, and this one here was the Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, that's a rule of thumb. These are formulas you will use anytime you do a box plot or a 5-number summary to consider outliers. Okay, state the 5-number summary. Okay, let's refresh what that is. We have the minimum, the Q1, the median, the Q3, and the maximum. Okay, so our minimum was 185. The Q1 came out to be 195. Our median was 215. Q3 was 237.5. And the max was 270. Okay. and construct a box and whisker plot using the values. We're going to do this by hand, and then I'm going to show you again how to do that on your calculator. Okay, but what we use is we use these 5 numbers. Okay, the box plot is made up of these 5 values: your minimum, your Q2, the first quartile, the Q1, the median, the Q3, and the max. And sometimes outliers, this is called a modified box plot, where your outliers are outside of those whiskers. Okay, so let's draw this. Okay, and these 5 numbers are the 5-number summary. It's a way to kind of summarize your data in 5 numbers. Somebody could just look at these 5 numbers and say, okay, 50% of the players weigh more than 215, 50% weigh less. The lightest player is 185. The heaviest player is 270, okay, and so on. And then you can do even better than that. You can create a box plot. Before we draw the box plot, this is so important, you have to draw your scale and evenly space your scale. So 185 up to 270. So I'm going to go up by tens. I'll start with 180. How about 190, 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, 260, 270, 280. Okay, now I'm going to go above this. And again, if you forget how to do these, I did post some links to some really good videos on how to draw a box plot and then also how to interpret a box plot. Okay, but we're going to put little dash marks at 185, the minimum, halfway between 180 and 190, but above. Don't draw it right on top of your number line. You're drawing it above. This is only for guidance, so you can see about where your box plot lies and what numbers there are. So the 185 is about there. The 195, my next number I have to put, my next dash is 195, halfway from 190 to 200. It doesn't have to be exact, but this is helping you get a shape of your box plot. The 215, halfway between 210 and 220, that's about there. 237.5, so 230, 240, halfway would be 235, probably about there is 237.5. And then 270 is all the way over here. Okay, let's label these. This one right here was 270, which was our max. This one was 237.5, which was Q3. This was 215, which was our median. This was 195, which was our Q1. And this was 185, the minimum. Okay, so here's what we do. We take the Q1 and the Q3, we draw a box. And from the edge of the box out to the max, we draw a whisker. That's why it's called a box and a whisker plot. The other lower end of the box, we draw a whisker out there. Okay. Now remember, this right here, the median split our data. 50% was above. 50% of the players weighed more. And then 50% was below. Then we split the bottom half into 2 equal halves. So if you split 50% into 2, we had 25% of our data was between 195 and 215. 25% was between 185 and 195. 25%, when we split up the top 50%, we get 25% and 25%. Okay? So this is key because this whisker is a lot longer than this whisker. But that doesn't mean there's more values here. It just means they're more spread out. There's 25% of our values. So with 17 players, that's roughly 4 players' weights are spread out between 237.5 and 270. And over here, there's 4 players between 185 and 195. Okay. So this looks like, if you look at the side that has the bigger whisker and maybe the side of the box that's a little bigger, this is showing a little bit of skewness to the right. Okay, and this is bunched up more over here. So let's calculate some of these things. I'm going to show you how to do this on your calculator and we can compare. Okay, just we're going to do this real quick on the calculator. Let's go back to current. Okay, so I'm going to create a new page, Control Add Page, and I'm going to create data and statistics. Go down to the bottom, click to add variable. All I'm doing is adding our weights. There's weights right there, hit enter. Okay, now I'm going to hit menu, and it says plot type, and I'm going to arrow to the right. I want a box plot. There's our box plot. As you can see, this whisker on the right was a lot more. If you arrow over here, there's your max 270. I didn't arrow over, I just hovered over. If you use this touchpad, you just kind of hover over and you can move that. Don't grab it. It sometimes messes up your data when you accidentally grab it. So there's the Q1, the 237.5. There's the median, 215. There's the 195, the Q1, and then the minimum 185. So the shape is the most important thing. You can see this right side of the box is a little bit bigger than the left side, and this right whisker is a little bit bigger. So this means it's skewed a little bit to the right. There's a couple of values that are bigger, that are a little further away from the center, that median, that might be pulling the mean a little bit higher than the median. Because remember when we saw that data with Michael Jordan's salary out of college, and he was making $2 million, and the other geography majors were making averaging about 22,000. Okay, that one outlier can pull the mean bigger than the median, because the mean, remember, you add up all the values, it takes into account every single value. The median doesn't take into account the actual value of each of the data points. It just counts how many are above and how many are below. Okay. In this distance from here to here, that's your inner quartile range. It's called that because these are your two inside quartiles. Remember, 50% in here, 50% in here. I'm sorry, 25% here and 25% here. Okay, so 25% of the players are between this value, our Q1, which was 195, to our median, which was 215, and 25% between here and here. If you add up those two 25s, you get 50%. So that inner quartile range is the distance from here to here. It means 50% of our players are between 195 and 237.5. In that range, from there to there, when we subtracted those two, 237.5 minus 195 was 42.5. The overall range was 85. So just so you can see that in this picture, the distance from here all the way to here was 85. That's the range of values. The inner quartile range, the distance from here to here, that's the inside 50%. That distance from there to there was the IQR, 42.5. That range is only 42.5. Okay? Calculate the mode, the mean, and the median. Now, the mode is the one that occurs the most. So we could, when we listed all of our data points, we could see that there was 195 occurred 3 times. Nothing else occurred that many times. The 215 occurred twice, 220 occurred twice, but the one that occurs the most was the 195. So that's our mode. Okay, so that's one way to measure center. Well, I don't care where, there might be data all over the place, but I want to know what did the most people weigh? Well, 3 people weighed that. The mean, you add them all up and divide by 17. Standard deviation, okay. That I'm going to show you how to do. So this is also another way. So I'm going to add another page, and I'm going to show you. I think you saw this. I think we saw this before, but it's also on one of the videos. I'm going to add a page. I'm just going to add a calculator page this time. And this time I'm going to go down to menu, and I'm going to hit number 6 for statistics. I'm going to do my stat calculations, number 1. Number 1 for one variable statistics. Just hit enter. I only have one list. And then my list, I have to arrow to the right, make sure I'm pointing to the list that I want. Hit enter, and it gives me a whole bunch of stuff. Here we can verify our 5-number summary, our min 185, the Q1 195, the median 215, the Q3 237.5, and the max 270. Okay, let's go up here. The mean is the X with the bar over it, 217.353. So Our mean is 217.353. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and find the standard deviation. This S with the X, SX, it's really an S with a small x, is 25.0074. So the way we say that is SX equals 25.0074. And I'll show you where that is. Okay. So that's going to be this one. You've got the mean up there. These sigmas, don't worry about those. The SX right there is your standard deviation. And then but down below there, N is 17. There were 17 players, 17 weights. And then here's your 5-number summary. Okay. Comment on the data. It's the last thing we're going to do. So it looks roughly symmetric. Okay. This is about the same size as this. Now this whisker is a little bigger, so it might be a little skewed to the right. Okay, remember when Michael Jordan's $2 million salary skewed and pulled our mean all the way up to 300,000 when everyone else had an average of, or with everybody else without him had an average of about 22,000. Okay, so the outliers, there's no outliers. We calculated outliers. There were none. Okay, but there are a couple weights that are a little bit further away, and those are going to pull your mean a little bit higher than the median. And we see that. The median was 215. The mean was 217. So it only pulled it a couple of pounds greater, which really is a sign that's a little bit skewed to the right, but mainly it's approximately symmetric. Okay. So I'm going to say the weights are very slightly skewed to the right. Okay. Because the mean is a little more, I'll say a little bit greater than the median. Okay. Overall, fairly symmetric. And by symmetric, I pretty much mean bell-shaped. Kind of looks pretty symmetric. Is usually looks the same on the left as it does on the right. Maybe a little skewed to the right. Okay. Okay, and that's all for now. So the next couple pages, what you're going to do, you're going to look at the Bulls' salaries, which is a little more interesting. I want you to do that on your own. You're going to follow the steps to make the box and whisker plot. You can do it on your calculator, but I want you to draw it. Was any salary an outlier? I want you to go through and follow the steps. You can look at what we did with the weights. You're finding the inner quartile range, the IQR, multiplying by 1.5. You're adding that to the Q3, subtracting from the Q1 to find those fences and see if any salaries are outside of there. Okay. How closely packed are the data? Are they really closely packed? The weights were pretty closely packed. Okay. Then I want you to look at these questions. And then the last page, you're going to do the same thing with the heights. Okay. And you're just going to do these questions over here. Okay. And when you're done, please submit that onto Schoology. Hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you soon.